What is the anchoring technique? Simply put, it's the tendency of a person to rely heavily on a piece of information they received when making decisions, without effort or even awareness, because we are most of the time naturally connecting external stimuli with experiences from our past, creating these associations that can become triggered in our future. An example of a simple anchor, it can be the smell of fresh popcorn at a carnival. The smell can remind us of something from the past, like maybe our childhood home, or maybe it can remind us of our first date, which may have happened at a carnival, or maybe it reminds us of a movie theater that sells popcorn. And with those associations in mind, we are feeling good and reminiscent of a good memory and a good experience. And in that case, we are much more likely to purchase popcorn today. This behavior was first noticed by an American doctor, Dr. Bill Tweedmeyer, and made famous by the work of Dr. Ivan Pavlov, who created the conditioning technique, creating a link between the hearing of a bell and the salivation in dogs. Pavlov offered his dogs food and simultaneously rang the bell. After doing this for a while, the result was that whenever the bell was rung, even if no food was present, the dog would salivate. This is often referred to as conditioning to a stimulus, which clearly leads to a response. And animal training in general, it's based on this technique. But it was not until the late 70s that Richard Bandler and John Grinder noticed that humans behave the same way. It was part of their development of neurolinguistic programming, and later this started being applied in sales. According to scientists, there are 5 important factors in successful anchoring, and these are the intensity of the experience, as it turns out that anchors who are associated with intense emotions and intense states of mind, like genuine happiness, intrinsic motivation, a great level of comfort and well-being, all these work much better than others who only get associated with medium or low level emotions. The second factor that is so important is the timing of the anchor. And this is where the experience of the salesperson comes to play, as the anchor using the wrong time can be perceived as rude or in bad faith. The third factor is the uniqueness of the stimulus, and this goes hand in hand with how well you listen and how fast you get to find details about your potential clients. In general, using common stimuli like opening a door or shaking a hand or talking about the weather in general may not be as effective as purposefully unique anchors, because the general anchors, like talking about the weather, can result in random reflexes, and they will get smaller and smaller over time. The fourth factor is the replication of the stimulus. And it's clear that to make sure that the anchor is strongly catching into the client's neurological processes, we as salespeople should be able to repeat it in a precise manner every time we practice it. In the case of, let's say, arranging our glasses on the nose, the gesture should be done at certain frequency and for a certain duration, and it has to be like that every time. And the fifth and last factor that is important is the number of times, which practically means that the more we do it, the better we get at it. To strengthen an anchor, it should be set up multiple times, which is a process that it's known as stacking the anchors. There are 3 anchoring techniques that have been proven to be successful when used on oneself. The first being the smell. In fact, the smell anchoring technique was created by Jordan Belfort, the man who is also known as the Wolf of Wall Street, who he used this on himself. He used the technique that was very similar to Pavlov's dog experiments by focusing on creating high emotional states such as great confidence levels to use in his sales situations. Here's what he does. Every time he closes a deal and feels the rush of success, he pulls out his non-medicated all-natural nasal inhaler and takes a big inhalation, anchoring in the peak of a highly positive emotional state. He does the same whenever he needs an extra boost of confidence at the beginning of the day or before he heads in with a client, before he makes a call. The second technique he's using, it's the focus anchoring technique. This time he doesn't use smell, he uses touch. By taking a specific finger from his left hand to press it into the middle of his right palm. This anchoring works very well when you are working on a certain serious project and you're focusing on a course of action. Those times when you are in a state of extreme focus. So every time you find yourself in a state of extreme focus, naturally, practice an anchoring technique. It can be like him or it can be something else. Practice it time after time. And in order to verify if it works, choose a moment when you are out of focus and you're trying to regain your focus. So apply that touch technique that you choose with this, in this case, the left finger in the right palm. And according to Belfort, your focus will come back. The third anchoring technique that both were recommending, it's being used to help him sleep. But it can be used in so many different environments. And even though he's using smells again in this technique, any gesture or any noise that brings on relaxation will have the same effect. The point of this technique is to quiet the mind and help one relax and go to bed when they are extremely tired. Using a specific smell or a noise as an anchor to reinforce the association between going to sleep and this particular anchor. If possible, he recommends to do this very often and replicate the experience as best as possible. And once you feel that you've practiced enough, in those nights when you are not able to sleep, the smell or the noise may help you feel tired and go to bed. Just like this, like I said, a sound machine in the background will work very well as an anchor, and millions of people are using that. It's a great result of anchoring when someone who knows needs to sleep but doesn't feel tired. They just lay in bed, eyes open, and then they put their anchoring technique on. They just turn on the sound machine or they turn on the smell machine and they fall asleep in minutes. In all these examples of techniques, Belfort has associated a positive emotion of high importance to him with stimuli that come usually from outside himself, like the sound, the gesture of the touch, the smell, etc. The main idea is that whenever we experience an intense emotional state, it is almost certain that our mind will link something else in our environment to that emotion. Think about what happens when we look at an old photography, an old photo album, or listen to old music. We get carried away down the memory lane and we go back to some distant time feeling good or bad in the present, depending on that specific memory. Not to mention those movie scenes or those songs that remind us of, I don't know, our first love or best friend, etc. What about perfume? Does a certain perfume have a certain effect on you? Perhaps it triggers a memory of someone special, of some special time. All these I have mentioned are anchors, and their true power lies not only in being able to relieve emotions from the past, but in the fact that we can set them up intentionally if we understand that when somebody is experiencing a strong emotion, or a strong mindset, they will likely link anything unique in their environment to that experience. And not only does this work when we are experiencing something real or something tangible in the moment, but it works when we are re-experiencing something in our head, in the memory, if the memory is strong enough. This way, there are many things that we can set up as anchors. A certain location, like the restaurant where you went on a first date. A certain smell, like grandma's cooking, your favorite meal. A certain sound, in my case, the rain pouring on asphalt remind me of Bucharest in the summer, or the feeling of comfort that you get from wearing an old sweater, which may be as much related to the things that you've experienced in that sweater as it is to the sweater itself. So, as you see, we can use this anchor technique on ourselves through neuro-linguistic programming. Okay, so now let's see how it can be used on others pertinent to the sales process. Let's take an experiment. I want you for now to imagine a conversation, which later I hope you will practice with a friend who you know just purchased a new car, the car of their dream, and so happy with their purchase. Pretend that you are talking to your friend George, let's say, from which you will like a small favor later, but right now they got a new car and they are excited. Start by asking George what sort of car he brought. Pay attention to how his eyes light up and the tone of his voice changes as he talks about his new Tesla. Ask him this: was buying that car a good decision? More than likely he will say yes, of course, and go on telling you why that was a great decision and how happy he is about it. And while he does that, he might even jump for joy if it's his first Tesla. And I want you to focus on the every strong positive responses from George and anchor each of them to a unique sound or a unique movement that you make. Perhaps, touching your chin or touching your ear or something like that. Whatever seems natural, but make sure to perform this gesture every time that George gets super excited talking about his new car. Do this several times as you ask for more details, ask more questions, and get more positive answers to amplify that feeling and help the process. Then change the subject and talk about something that has no emotional content, like, oh, it's nice outside. Later, when it comes time to ask George for a favor, repeat the exact same movement, that anchor. Touch your chin or push your glasses or touch your ear, whatever it is that you've done. And whatever you do this, you will notice that George will start feeling good and be excited without really knowing why. This will greatly assist you in getting the favor. Think about it. How useful is it to be able to control the emotional state of your clients? With the anchoring technique, you can at least attempt to do that. It takes practice and it takes time and lots of conditioning, but the results have been around as positive for a long time. Bottom line is, when used correctly, the anchoring technique really works. So let's see how to do this. First, you start by uncovering what the prospect wants or needs during the conversation, often repeating back to them those wants or needs in exactly the same way that the clients express them. Just like we said previously in the Asking the Right Questions lecture, this creates an unconscious connection between you and your prospect because it makes them feel heard and understood. And feeling understood makes any person elated and happy. In a case like this, you often just use what you find throughout active listening during the conversation, after which you repeat back to them what you've heard, offering them the feeling of being understood and therefore creating a happy and comfortable emotion in association with you. That makes sense so far, right? This is a classic subliminal persuasion technique. So keep this in mind. During face-to-face or phone conversations, many experienced salespeople can also anchor their potential clients to a feeling by simply using the tone of their voice alone or together with a gesture or with a posture choice. So I want you to imagine that you are an experienced coach with great numbers of clients that you've helped, and you participate in weekly networking events, meeting a large number of potential clients, where most of the time the conversation starts with chatting about the week. Imagine that at the networking meetings, you are able to exchange business cards and make those connections. And now it's time to have that one-on-one face-to-face talk by inviting the client to your office. Now you are sitting at your desk, opposite on the other side of the desk from the client, asking them about their week. You are listening actively, purposefully. And when they say that they had a good week, imagine yourself talking in a happy tone and placing your left hand on a certain spot on your desk. So when they talk good about their week, do this gesture and talk happily. Conversely, if you had a potential client that had a really bad week, imagine yourself talking in a different, more monotone tone and place your right arm on the side of the chair that you're sitting on. Have the conversation going, and after the casual talk has passed and you are changing the conversation now to business, follow this strategy. When the client brings up your competition saying, "Oh, I've tried different coaching programs before and different products and it didn't really work out for me," well, remember that tone of the voice, that monotone tone of the voice that you used when they were talking about their bad week. And remember the way that you put your arm on the side of the chair. Replay that and go back to that position and that voice as often as needed for as long as they talk about something that you want them to associate with a negative emotion. On the other hand, when the time comes, so let them tell their stories, but when the time comes for you and them to talk about what you have to offer, what your programs and your packages are, now use the happy voice that you've used when they were talking about having a good week, and put the left hand on the appropriate spot on the desk. Repeat this as necessary and you will see that the results are impressive. As you know already from my previous courses or from my profile description, I've lived the first 23 years of my life in Europe before moving to the United States. And I have not grown up with the typical American talk shows, but many people have heard of Johnny Carson. If you go to Universal Studios, he's present there, represented. He was the host of The Tonight Show for almost 30 years before John Leno took over in 1992. And it's always fun to watch reruns of this TV shows just to see where people's mindsets were back in the day compared to now. And that's just me. But from watching these reruns, I remember that each night Johnny Carson stood on a small star on the stage that marked exactly where he was supposed to stay. The best spot from all the angles, for all the cameras, connecting with the audience and being able to control the show from there. And the main thing that Johnny ever did from that specific location was to make people laugh. He didn't walk around like other hosts or other comedians do. He didn't sit down behind a desk. And many would say that often he didn't even have to talk because people would just laugh at him standing on his star. What do you think this is? Experts agree that it's because Johnny Carson created a special anchoring effect for the audience, both in person and in front of the TV, linking in people's minds his persona with having fun and laughing while standing on that star. When we look at the fact that he was the host of the TV show for 30 years in a row, that shows that his success was great, and that anchor technique works. So you can see how anchors don't always have to be one thing or another. They can be a sense, they can be words, they can be a gesture, they can be a place on a stage, and more. Now, price, as in numbers, can also be used as an anchor. Have you ever heard of the MSRP, the manufacturer suggested retail price, as the number that Americans are going to check first when they are starting to look to sell or to buy a car? Back in the day, the only way we could purchase a new vehicle was to go to the dealership or to the car sales place and have to deal face to face with sometimes an annoying salesperson who would drag the negotiation throughout the day. I literally remember that it lasted 7 hours to make the first purchase of my first car when I came to the United States. However, today things are different because today we have technology. We can sign contracts on our phone and the process is supposed to move a little faster. But what's ironic today, just like in the past, when going to a dealership, you still see big price stickers on car windows and you wonder, if I have access to see this price of the vehicle at a click of a button on my phone, what's the point of listing the prices of the car window still? The question applies specifically for those who know the number on the sticker. It's not what the dealership paid for the car. And it's also known as MSRP numbers are artificially inflated numbers. In this case, you may think that this sales tactic while exposing the price should not work these days, right? We're past that. However, as hard to believe as it is, experiments show that even a randomly generated price has a direct influence on what the client is willing to pay for a product or a service, even when they know logically that that price may have been randomly generated by a machine. This is called price anchoring effect, and it's explained by social psychologists by the simple fact that humans have the tendency to use the first available piece of information to get to a decision. And that initial information anchors our brains with a mental shortcut to the decision making. In this case, for our example, establishing that the price in the window of a car, it's a reasonable price for that specific car. Let me give you another example in the form of a research which was conducted at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology by Drazen Prelec and Dan Ariely, who wanted to see how influenced we really are as consumers by an initial anchor price, even if we know that that price is completely disconnected from the real value of the item that we are considering buying. In this